What to expect when going into a UK prison for the first time. If you're considering taking an all expenses paid holiday at Her Majesty's pleasure, then I hope this video helps. Number 1, the sweat box. So you're on the way to prison. You will be placed in what's called a sweat box. This is basically a van which internally is separated into different cells. You will almost always have a window seat which will allow you to look out onto the world that you're about to leave behind. Though you're able to see out, as it's one-way glass, ain't nobody be able to see you. You will start to feel like you don't exist, and let me tell you, you better get used to this. Number 2, induction. Now, forget your first name. From the second you leave the sweat box and enter the prison, you will be referred to by your surname and you will be issued a prison number, something like PF8355. The only people to call you by your first name are the other inmates, if you tell them to and if they choose to. I myself, I got so used to being called by my surname that I just told everyone to call me by my surname. I hope to God that you've got a good surname like Jones or Smith. There was one guy I was locked up with, his surname was Gay, which meant every time the officer needed him, they'll say, "Are you gay?" During your induction, you will be given your prison clothes, a toothbrush, soap, and other little necessities. If you're a smoker, you'll be given a small smoker's kit, which will include a small amount of tobacco, Rizzlers, and a lighter. This is the only time you'll be issued tobacco for free. Now listen, hardly anybody smokes cigarettes in prison. If you smoke cigarettes right now, you better practice your rolling. Prisons around the country have what's called an induction wing, where you will spend the first few days or even the first week. This gives you a chance to understand how your life is going to be before they throw you in with the main population. Now, not all prisons have an induction wing, so this journey may be skipped altogether. A thing that all prisons must do is send an officer to your cell to ask you questions in order to assess your safety and the safety of others. The questions will be something along the lines of, are you a racist? How would you feel about being locked up with a person of a different race? Have you ever tried to harm yourself? Are you dependent on drugs? Are you dependent on alcohol? Are you religious? How would you feel about being locked up with a person of a different religion? Are you part of a gang? If so, what's the name of your gang? Now, the officers aren't trying to catch you out when they ask you what the name of your gang is. They just ask you so they know not to put you in a wing where some of your rivals might be staying. Number 3, the prison officers. As you most likely know, prisoners refer to prison officers as screws. This isn't considered an offensive word by the officers, and it's been used for decades. Screw was once slang for the word key, and as it's the officer's job to turn the key on your cell each night, I'm sure you can see how the name came about. You will find that screws have very different attitudes depending on whether you're in a young offenders prison, which is from the age of 18 to 21, compared to the screws of an adult prison. I found that the screws in a young offenders are absolute fucking twats. They're basically bullies. They talk to inmates like shit, they throw the weight around, and they have no time for anyone but themselves. Due to the guards almost always being a lot bigger than the young offenders, they don't take much shit, and they make sure you know not to mess with them. I've seen them go really overboard when it comes to dealing with a prisoner. I've seen punches thrown by the officers, and I even saw a certain screw headbutt an inmate. Now, the screws in an adult prison, they're much more relaxed. Though some of them will always look down on each and every inmate, the officers in the adult prison tend to show a lot more respect to inmates when respect is shown to them. Whereas the screws at a young offenders see the inmates as annoying little shits, the screws at an adult prison see the inmates as just a person who made a mistake. That was my personal take on it anyway. Then again, now I think about it, it may have something to do with the fact that most adult prisoners tower over the guards. Either way, watch out for the screws at the young offenders. Number 4, the prisoners. Now, you may have an idea of what prisoners look like from watching movies. You probably imagine the inmates to all look like huge bodybuilders with bullet holes all over their bodies and scars all over their face. Now, this is totally not true. Although you will come across a few inmates who match that description, the majority of prisoners just look like everyday people. It's important to remember that all prisoners are human. Nearly all inmates have parents who love them, or a partner, or kids, or friends, or other people on the outside who care for them. Although there are people such as murderers, rapists, paedophiles, etc., the majority of inmates are just guys who fell on hard times, made a mistake, drank too much and drove, or just did something fucking stupid. When I first went to prison, I expected to walk into the prison and know nearly everyone. Unfortunately for me, that wasn't the case. Prisons are full of people from all over the country, and you won't necessarily be put in a prison close to where you live. There are just under 150 prisons in England and Wales and over 80,000 inmates. Prisons are also so big that you could be in the same prison as 20 of your friends and you'll never see them once. Now, you will come across many drug addicts in prison, and you will be offered drugs on much more than one occasion. I personally have never touched any hard drugs, but there's honestly been times when I was in prison when I was so down that I did really consider it. I was once locked up with a successful gentleman. He was a friendly guy, he had a nice house, a nice car, nice wife, he ran his own business, and he had everything going for him. He was serving less than a year for tax fraud or for not paying his tax or something like that. Anyway, he came in with no history of drink or drugs, but due to his life falling apart on the outside, when he finally left, he was addicted to crack. My advice is, no matter how hard it is, remember that one day it will be over. That's providing you're not serving fucking life, obviously. Now, there's a big difference between life in young offenders compared to an adult prison. The general attitude in a young offenders is that of a bad man. Every prisoner wants to prove how big and tough they are to one another. Many young offenders want to be the bad man that they see on the films. They often wear their heart on their sleeve and look for any excuse to fight. Adult prison is much different. Adults are of course much more mature, don't feel they have to prove anything, and generally just want to serve their time in peace. Of course, this can't be said for all adult prisoners, but it can be said for the majority. Number 5, the hardest part of prison. It's not the screws trying to make your life hell which is the hardest part, and it's not the fact that you have to worry about your safety from other inmates. The hardest part is being forgotten. You hear and watch the rest of the world move on without a second thought to you. As people continue living the rest of their lives, you look at the same 4 walls, surrounded by people who don't give 2 fucks about you. People have hung themselves in the same wing I have been in, and many prisoners find this to be a funny event. You can't nip to the shop to buy a Mars bar, you can't go to the cinema, you can't go for a walk in the park, you can't do anything other than live for the sake of living. It's horrible to go through, and you will go through a lot of hard times mentally and emotionally. If you're like me and you're a man, the likelihood is that you will never ever talk about your feelings to anyone, and you will have to deal with this life-changing, rock-bottom predicament completely alone. On a more positive note, when you are out, you will appreciate life and never take anything for granted again. Many people do make the same mistakes and go straight back in, while others learn from the errors and take advantage of the life lesson that they have experienced. Personally, prison was the best thing to happen to me. Damn, this video took a lot longer than I intended. There's a lot more that I wanted to touch on, such as the different categories of prison, gambling, gangs, escapes, weapons, moving prisons, phones, letters, visits, passing messages, making money, making alcohol, the nonces, suicides, solitary confinement. I tell you what, if you did like me taking the time to upload this video and find it helpful, please hit that like button and I'll release a part 2. Peace.